Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Monday, March 25th. Today is the 171st day since the attacks by Hamas and other militants in the southern part of Israel. This is Holy Week for those of us who observe the Western church calendar, Protestants and Catholics around the world. It's the 171st day. There's lots of updates today. The UN Security Council did pass a binding resolution. Well, it was binding, but the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations apparently thinks it's not binding. That's news since I prepared this update. I'll let you follow that on your own time. But technically, UN Security Council resolutions are binding, at least according to my understanding. The resolution is calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. During the month of Ramadan. This breaks down a 5-month impasse during which the United States vetoed several different calls for ending the war, even as the humanitarian toll has climbed higher and higher. The resolution passed with 14 votes in favor. The United States abstained. This allowed the resolution to pass. The chamber broke into applause after the vote. The breakthrough of the resolution, which All News has reported is legally binding, this was put forward by the 10 non-permanent members of the council. It was negotiated intensely up until the last minute. The U.S. asked for a change in the text that was removed that removed permanent ceasefire and replaced it with lasting ceasefire. This is according to diplomats. The language left room for Israel to be able to defend itself. It called for both sides to create conditions where the halt in fighting could be sustained. So what's this mean? Even though the resolution is binding under international law, there are many Security Council resolutions that have not been implemented by Israel or by other states. So in some ways, you could view this as more symbolic, as an expectation that might not be actually enforced, but there will be calls for there to be reports on its implementation. Prime Minister Netanyahu threatened to recall the Israeli team that is currently in the United States or supposed to be in the United States if the US did not veto this resolution. And after this passed, the Israeli government canceled their planned diplomatic visit to the U.S. Reports have said tensions are flaring over the UN vote demanding the ceasefire in Gaza. The Israeli delegation had been set to include the Minister of Strategic Affairs, Ron Dermer, and the National Security Advisor, Tzatziki Hanegbi. The White House National Security Council spokesperson, John Kirby, told reporters immediately after the vote that the abstention did not represent a change in policy. And really, we should listen to them, just for the record. He said there's no reason for this to be seen as some sort of escalation. Nothing's changed about our policy. We still want to see a ceasefire. We still want to get the hostages out, as do we. And we still want to see more humanitarian assistance get to the people of Gaza. Hamas welcomed the resolution. They said that this affirms the readiness to engage in immediate prisoner swaps on both sides. In terms of updates on hostage negotiations over the weekend, it was communicated from Israel's perspective that they have demonstrated flexibility on 2 major issues. One is the number of Palestinian prisoners that would be released, as well as number 2 was Hamas's condition that people in Gaza be allowed to return to the north of the Strip, which that return to the north has been one of Hamas's conditions all along. The other one that has not been mentioned in the news is Hamas has said all along they will not release further hostages until there is a permanent ceasefire agreement in place, or at least on the horizon, and we've not heard anything about that. Now, today, senior Hamas officials in Qatar said that the possibility of reaching a release deal is not as close as Israel is presenting itself, and that Israel is instead trying to stall and continue its military offensive, including the operation in Rafah. The Palestinian Red Crescent Society said that Israeli forces have besieged 2 hospitals in the Strip, Al-Amal and Nasser, adding that one of its staff was killed when Israeli tanks pushed back in the areas of Khan Yunis amid heavy bombardment. This was from a raid that began over the weekend, according to the Israeli Defense Forces, in the western part of Khan Yunis, overnight on Saturday into Sunday. Sources in Gaza said that it is believed that Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad members, including senior level leadership, had regrouped at Al-Shifa Hospital, thinking that Israel had ended their operations in the north. That was reported by ABC News. The health ministry in Gaza has said that civilians in the north of Gaza should stay away from the main areas where aid is distributed. So think about this. This is the area in Gaza where people are starving the most, where famine is imminent, and they are being told, stay away from where you can get food. You're starving, but stay away from where you can get food because you will get shot. That's what the health ministry is saying. They're saying not to crowd trucks because this will risk your lives. Over the weekend, the UNRWA Commissioner Lazzarini said that Israelis informed the United Nations they will no longer approve any UNRWA food convoys to the north of Gaza, adding that this was done to obstruct life-saving assistance during a man-made famine. The UN Director Guterres said after meeting with humanitarian aid workers who operated in Gaza that they said they never encountered a situation as difficult as the humanitarian situation they are experiencing in Gaza. The death toll, as of the most recent numbers, so these are typically a day or so past, the death toll is now 32,333 Palestinians killed, 74,694 Palestinians wounded since October 7th. It has been reported, according to a new poll, that Palestinian support for October 7th remains high and has risen among Gaza residents. This was conducted by the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research earlier this month. Hamas fired a barrage of 8 rockets towards Ashdod. That's a city in Israel that's just north of Gaza. This is the first barrage of rockets on the coastal city since January 14th. And the Israeli foreign minister spokesperson told 4 European countries that their plan to work toward the recognition of a Palestinian state constituted a prize for terrorism. I did just lose my place. Let's see. A prize for terrorism that would reduce the chances of a negotiated resolution to the conflict. In the West Bank, Israeli forces said that they foiled an attempt by Iran to smuggle weapons into the West Bank. That's by a joint statement that came out from the Shin Bet and the Israeli Defense Forces. And the IDF said that it arrested 7 suspects, Palestinian suspects, overnight into Monday who were planning attacks in the West Bank. In Jordan, riot police were needed and they fired tear gas on hundreds of demonstrators that were marching on the Israeli embassy in Amman. This is a tipping point. This is something we need to pay close attention to. If things start to tip in the broader Middle East, I mean, I think I've mentioned that I've been hearing from friends, you know, in the Arab world, friends in Israel, that there is a big concern that we could be on the precipice of a broader Middle East war, a real war in the Middle East, and even on the precipice of a larger war than that. And when we start to see things like, you know, Israeli embassies being attacked by riots, this is deeply disconcerting. So riot police were needed to quell those demonstrations. And then in response to the question of the Rafah offensive, our Vice President Harris, she said, when asked if there would be consequences from the United States if Israel were to conduct a military operation in Rafah, she said, "I am ruling out nothing." Yesterday, on Sunday, 14 NGOs, backed by 13 other organizations, supporting their findings and stating that Israel is not in compliance with President Biden's National Security Memorandum, stating that recipients, countries from U.S. weapons cannot obstruct humanitarian aid in conflict zones. Doctors Without Borders, International Rescue Committee, Oxfam America, Save the Children, U.S. signed the statement, while Amnesty International and Refugee International lent their support. These agencies said, remember I talked about these 2 different mechanisms, the humanitarian aid mechanism and this national security mechanism. They're saying that the U.S. should stop sending weapons because of humanitarian aid that's going from the U.S. being withheld from Gaza. So that statement went out yesterday. And then I'll have an update today about news that came out of the State Department in regard to that security memorandum. Other news, Donald Trump called Biden a dumb person and said that he would act like Israel in response to the attack of October 7th, saying Israel has to be careful because you're losing a lot of the world and you're losing a lot of support. He declared that U.S. Jews who do not support him, Donald Trump, hate Israel. That was in an interview. New York Times reported that those under the rubble could be 7,000 people or more. Gaza has become a 140 square mile graveyard. Each destroyed building is another jagged tomb for those still buried within. The most recent health ministry estimate for the number of people missing is around 7,000, but that figure has not been updated since November. And then the final news I wanted to share, and personally, I think this is the most absurd news of the day. The U.S. Deemed Israel to be in compliance with a national security memorandum, stipulating that recipients of U.S. weapons have to be in compliance with international law. And they stated today that they believe Israel is in compliance with the national security memorandum. And so they that was reported by Matthew Miller of the U.S. State Department. I apologize about the light. I'm in a different place today. I do hope, please go online and visit our Holy Week with Gaza. We have 2 or 3 videos out so far. There'll be at least 1 or 2 videos released every day. Several of us will be worshiping together on Saturday, Holy Saturday, before Easter Sunday. And so we invite you to worship with us this Holy Week, where we so desperately need to be together in solidarity, calling for a comprehensive ceasefire, the release of hostages, immediate and adequate humanitarian assistance into Gaza, and Lord, help us that these core issues, of this ongoing conflict be addressed.